Welcome to this video, guys. So it has been a minute since I have actually flipped on the old camera, but there's a lot of stuff that has happened recently. There's been a ton of momentum. There's been a ton of projects which we have been working on, and I'm going to share something which I have thought about now in the past time, because I've had a very little amount of time to actually focus on producing content, and I thought, why not make something that is actually valuable, that you guys can actually utilize and learn from, and from this video go straight into action. So that's my whole idea with this new kind of series and things that we're going to be unpacking here. And on the first one of these roundabouts, we have James Freemantle. Now, James is what I would call an ecom whiz, all the way from Cape Town. He's based in Cape Town right now, and he works with brands in the fitness space, brands all over in the ecom space. And I'm just going to allow James to basically, give you guys a little bit of a background and basically an in-depth kind of view on what it is that he does specifically with companies and how they're a little bit different, so you guys can get a frame of reference just in terms of like what we're going to do. But these are going to be jam-packed, full of value. So I hope you guys enjoy these, and I'm going to give the driving thing over to James.
Well, man, I appreciate the introduction, and so just for anyone listening, my name is James. I run Fmg Digital. We are, as you mentioned, an e-com specialist agency. Our big focus in terms of differentiating from what we do in comparison to traditional, let's say, digital marketing agencies, is we're focused on profitable acquisition. So really helping brands grow and get new customers while still making profits. Obviously, one of the biggest issues when growing a business is pouring a bunch of money into acquiring new customers, running at a loss for a long time, and then recouping that through your LTV and your lifetime sales that come through those customers. So that's kind of been our biggest differentiating point. As you mentioned, we do work primarily with health and fitness brands. However, we have taken on some clothing brands as we've gone. I think it's just my bias from the beginning, having kind of been involved in the health space like you were, and I know that's also kind of how we connected at first, was kind of that involvement in that industry. So that's kind of been the progression and what we do.
Okay, cool. So just so you guys, whoever is watching and tuning in for this video, just so you guys obviously better understand, I primarily work with 6 to 8 figure tech founders in the realm of whether it's an AI startup, whether it's a SaaS model, an application, or whatever that needs to be built. That's where we play around, and that's where we do stuff in. And how I basically met James was, like you said, obviously through the what you would call health and fitness space. You guys know, obviously, I pay a lot of attention to those things too. I feel that it's super important throughout your journey if you want to become a proficient entrepreneur. Not just even an entrepreneur. It's like an important piece of your life that you need to learn. I started Selfbuiltsystems, which is my company on the tech side. Because of the first thing that I solved, and I've shared this with James offline too, and how we kind of connected, is the first thing that I solved in my life was basically a fitness system. I needed to figure out the mechanics around how to work out to be better at playing sport, and those mechanics obviously, it involved strength training, it involved explosive stuff, it involved some CrossFit movements. So that's really where I found the footing and how we kind of connected. But yeah, that rolled us over obviously to doing what we do right now, how Selfbuiltsystems actually was born. But James, what I want us to do here is James actually prepared something for us, which we're going to share with you guys now. A few case studies and actionable things that we're going to run through. So I'm going to allow James to basically just share his screen real quick, and then he's going to have the steering wheel from there.
Perfect. Apologies for that second of inception there. Can you see what I've got up?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, so as you mentioned, we're going to run through exactly how we've been able to scale. This is specifically a health and fitness brand we've worked with in South Africa, how we scaled them from doing around 4 figures a month to multiple 7 figures. So as you can see here, this case study is primarily for health and beauty brand owners. The reason that I say that is because they're both very similar business models in the sense that you are really focused on kind of problem solution when it comes to the actual advertising creative, as well as also understanding that they both have similar aspects where there is a high kind of repeat purchase frequency after having made your initial sale. So supplements and beauty brands are both the case where you buy it once and then you end up buying it monthly after that. So It's the reason I made it quite specific, but as you can see, we were able to generate over 5.38 million from 1.3 million ad spend, generating a blended ROAS of about 400%, and this has been in a process of 16 months. So as you mentioned, I am the founder of Fmg Digital. We specialize in growing direct-to-consumer e-commerce brands. In our kind of history of just under 2 years now, we've managed to scale 8 e-com brands by over 1,000% in less than 90 days, which is pretty cool. Obviously, we've got some awesome clients who've got good things to say about us. And yeah, I just wanted to also touch on the fact that before we move forward, this is primarily for brands that have a validated product. So how we like to judge that is by having at least 30 reviews on a single product that are all obviously genuine and not bot generated, as well as an average order value of that kind of 700 Rand mark, specifically here in South Africa. And I'll touch into kind of why that's important moving forward. But yeah, just so you can see that I'm not lying to you and these are all genuine. You can see there's a screenshot of the Shopify details, as well as our ad account, as well as the Google ads that we had running for them as well. So to kind of dive into the background and understand where this brand was before we jumped on, yeah, Blast Vitality is a very, they were initially a small local supplement brand operating out of Durban. They were very much under the idea that they were doing absolutely everything, but only making 7 grand a month for that. So they were really kind of stuck. They were doing like the boosting posts, the giveaways, the influencer campaigns, like absolutely everything. And as you can see, they were kind of near zero growth, so 1.6% up from the year before. So yeah, we basically hopped on a couple calls with them, and they were actually, at the time of reaching out to them, they were on the border of closing down shop. So they'd been giving this thing a try. It wasn't really getting many sales for them, and they were kind of on their last stance with that. So decided to take a leap of faith. As you can see, they had an idea that if they could get to 100K a month within the year, they would be super happy and stoked. In that 12-month period, we were able to actually 7x that expectation and pull in about 700K for a single month, which was epic. They were super stoked about that, and so were we. As you can see, so this is the process that we've taken them through. I'm basically going to show you step by step exactly how we scaled up the brand. And as you mentioned, I know it's a conversation we've had a few times, is understanding really like the different levers that go into that. It's not just a single thing that moves the needle. You've got to understand the system as a whole. And I know with self-built systems, it's very similar in the sense that you have to really understand the entire approach and the entire funnel in order to understand how everything operates off each other. So without further ado, I'll jump into the process. So first and foremost is setting up your foundations. As I've mentioned here, running ads is a bit like fishing and throwing a net. The more holes you have, the less prepared you are, the more you're going to learn through your lessons, and the more resources you're going to burn in the process. So that's why we kind of have like our entire checklist before we get going. So that includes, first and foremost, ensuring that your Shopify and the Facebook pixel are integrated correctly so you can run your ads through API. All the product pages have social proof, so things like reviews and a bunch of other factors, which I won't dive into today because otherwise we could be here for a couple of hours. As well as your 4 highest converting flows, which is your welcome flow, your ban and card flow, your post-purchase flow, and your customer win back. That's not only going to ensure that you are more profitable from an acquisition standpoint, but it also help with the lifetime value of those customers moving forward. The next thing, and it's something that most people overlook, is having multiple payment methods, and especially having something like a Klarna or a PayJustNow or some kind of financing option for products, especially when they are at the slightly more high end. It's incredibly important to include that. The next thing, and the most boring thing, is having a lot of customer profiles identified through your market research and your historic data. At the end of the day, if you don't know who you're speaking to, you don't really know what you're doing when it comes to the ad side. And it's really going to be your differentiating factor in terms of having a successful campaign as opposed to just burning money. And then the other thing is, just so we kind of clarify, our big thing at FMG is running social ads. But we do always recommend that a brand have at least some kind of setup on their Google ads. So for example, with this client, all we did was set up a branding campaign. Now the reason we did that is obviously when you start to run really effective social ads, you get a lot of, you're basically doing demand generation. So people are coming to know about the brand, they're visiting the site, they may be potentially searching some of the stuff that you've touched on. And if you can have some form of branding campaign that just protects the brand name so that you don't get bid out against your competitors, that's going to really help you, and it's going to be an amazing asset just to have. And it's something you can set up super cheap, just literally putting like 100 Rand a day or something like that, just to kind of protect the brand. And then the next thing, and this is something that's maybe a little bit more advanced, it's definitely something we introduced later on, is setting up some kind of, like, for example, like a triple whale or some kind of third-party tracking platform that allows you to get a lot more accurate data than any of these advertising platforms are legally allowed to have. So that's a really effective thing to have in terms of moving forward, and we definitely recommend it. Second thing, and I know we're both super into cars, so I have included a fun bit here, but it's understanding that you need to have some form of halo product. You've got to understand that at the end of the day, if you are advertising absolutely everything, you're just confusing your target audience and you're diluting the brand. No one knows exactly what you stand for or what it is that's unique about your brand that you're offering. And yeah, I know we're both super into philosophy, so I've included a little quote here, but it's he who chases two rabbits catches neither. And it's so important when understanding that from an advertising standpoint. So you will see here is that's why we always identify a best-selling product, or at least what you hope to be the best-selling product, and then creating a high-value bundle around that. Not only does it increase your average order value, but it also increases your room for your cost to acquire customer, which is your CAC, which in turn obviously allows for more freedom and more aggressive bidding when entering your ad auction. Because at the end of the day, when you are advertising, it's essentially an auction and you're bidding in order to get your messaging in front of the correct person. So I put a photo here. This is something that Audi did with their R8, is they basically positioned the R8 as being their like absolute best product, and then more people came to the brand because they were like, that's a sick car. I've seen it in Iron Man. Tony Stark has it. Cool. And then they started buying the lower range Audis in order to obviously have that same brand affiliation. So something you can do similarly with your product. Now, the most important things to focus on when deciding on a product or a bundle is how do you actually stand out in the market. So two of the easiest ways to do this is either offering something with very little or no competition, and the second thing is positioning something in a way that allows you to stand out from your competitors. So really just changing your narrative or your script, or maybe potentially even the pain points that you want to focus on. So for example, in this case with this brand, we realized that there was very little competition for greens powders in South Africa, but there was a high global demand by brands like Athletic Greens and obviously their competitors. So it was an absolute no-brainer to decide on actually focusing as the greens product as being kind of like our hero or halo product. And then rather than positioning it as an alternative to like a multivitamin, which Athletic Greens were doing at the time, and also competitors within South Africa, we positioned it as a solution to real problems such as like bloating, constipation, leaky gut syndrome, and a bunch of other issues that are actual real problems that people focus on. And it's a lot more pressing than just saying, oh, take a multivitamin and you'll be healthier. It was rather, okay, cool, we have a solution to fix something that could potentially be causing you like embarrassment and shame and a bunch of other issues which are much deeper emotional feelings than, the promise that, oh, you could actually be a little bit healthier. And that kind of moves us into the third step, which is understanding your different pain points and how you can communicate them. So at the end of the day, pain always converts more than a promise, which is something I've just mentioned now. And that's because we as human beings are more receptive to danger than comfort. So basically the idea of being chased by a lion is a lot more intriguing than seeing a massive tree with beautiful apples on. At the end of the day, it's the fear of like being caught and dying is obviously going to be more intense than, oh, you know what, there's some food there that we could eat. So really understanding your pain points is super crucial in terms of understanding the customer, and then also understanding things like what's the current state they're in, what do they struggle with, what does their day look like, because the more you can really dive deep into that, you can figure out exactly what real issues they are dealing with in order to then obviously communicate that and stand out and really connect with the customer, as opposed to just being like a generic advertising company. So what you want to do is obviously understand those questions. You then want to link those struggles to negative outcomes and emotions that prospect might be dealing with. So for example, let's look at the fact of like bloating, which is something we obviously focused on. So the bloating is not the struggle, it's the fact that it makes someone feel self-conscious at the beach or worse in the bedroom. Take it a step further, it's the reason they haven't seen friends or been intimate with a partner, which is the reason they feel disconnected in life. So the deeper the level of understanding, the more effective your ads will be. Because if you can really understand the real human emotion behind the symptom, that allows you to then connect to them and obviously lead that in your communication strategy. So for example, with this case, we made use of primary and secondary research, which is obviously looking at what our customers had to say, as well as looking at the market as a whole and understanding the biggest struggles. We then were able to identify 12 leading pain points and then create scenarios of how the prospect was experiencing them and how it's impacting their life. We then use those negative-based outcomes to create statics and video content, as well as the direction for the copy to match the ads. The next step is, so you basically, at this point, you've got your foundation set up, you understand exactly which product it is you're focusing on, and you understand those pain points associated with it and how this product's going to solve those. You then move into your launch and testing phase. So now it's time, you've got everything ready, it's time to start making money from basically this whole process you've gone through. So now when it comes to running ads, we like to do things a little bit differently. In the past, like running ads was super technical and you had to like understand all these factors like detailed targeting and understand different cost caps. And while those still do have their place, we found sometimes the easiest way to do it is just simplify it. Now, the reason that we go for a more simple approach and we really don't do much in terms of like things like targeting and playing with like complex ad structures is just understanding that not only are you going to get cheaper CPMs that'll bring you more bang for buck, the algorithm is going to always be smarter than you, so you need to trust it and just let it do its thing. But the biggest thing in that is understanding that the focus then shifts to creating better ads as opposed to trying to beat the system. And at the end of the day, if you can do that, you're not only going to provide a better experience for the platform and get rewarded for like, for example, platforms like Meta, you're also going to connect more with the audience, and your focus then becomes about bringing value and really connecting with them as opposed to trying to beat the system. So the setup that I mentioned and the setup that we like to go with is something like this. Is having literally one campaign set at an advantage campaign budget, which used to be called CBO, where basically what that's allowing to do is you take your budget, you give it to Facebook, and then based on that, it's going to decide how it wants to spend it. So then what we'll do is set up 2 to 3 DCT ad sets, which their DCT stands for dynamic creative testing. Basically, if you ever go into your ad set, you'll be able to turn on dynamic creative, and that'll basically allow you to test different elements at once. So basically how we use that is we then put 3 pieces of creative, 2 headlines and 2 primary copy, and we allow basically Facebook to test those factors and really squeeze out the best combination of those individual assets to give us a winning ad. Now this is a much more effective way than the old way of setting up a bunch of different ad sets, keeping the audience the same and giving each ad set equal spend, because sometimes what can happen is obviously if you've got a terrible ad or a terrible offer or whatever it is, you're going to basically get 0 for that, whereas opposed to mixing these factors up, you at least giving Facebook the opportunity to get the best performance out of that and then ultimately get more sales through the process and waste less money in the testing process. So that's just a thing we found to work really, really well. Then what you're going to do is also set up a winners ad set. At the beginning, you don't need to focus too much about this, but as we go on and as you scale that brand, you're going to be moving those winning ads into that ad set in order to keep the best performance and then test against new ad sets. And then the other thing to do is exclude purchases from the last 180 days. So a lot of agencies and brands neglect this. And basically what happens then is you end up bidding again for the same customers that you've already paid to acquire. So by excluding them from your actual acquisition campaign, you're now able to focus on people that have never been to the brand and people that essentially haven't paid for in order to really get into the funnel. The only exception to looking at targeting would be, like, for example, if you are after a single gender or an age bracket. That's the only time we would look at changing that up. So like if you are doing like women's activewear, although you could potentially have a strategy that, let's say, for example, targets men and it's like, oh, get your wife or your girlfriend like the perfect activewear set for Christmas, like that's an exception. But understanding that those factors only really come into play if you are focused on like a single group of people and there's like limited parameters. And then other things to note when running your ads and setting it up is start with a minimum daily budget of at least 50% of the average order value or the bundle price, whatever it is that you are advertising. Then, as I said, when you are testing, is using that 3-2 method and scaling winners into that Advantage Plus campaign. And then also when testing is run for at least 4 to 7 days before you make any decisions. At the end of the day, you need to give it a little bit of time to kick back, and in order for those ads to actually serve properly. There is the odd case when you are spending huge amounts of money that can be like kind of cut down to, let's say, like 24 to 48 hours. But I always recommend for most brands like 4 to 7 days is a good time. Okay, so now you've had the ads running, they've been testing for like 4 to 7 days, you've seen a bit of attention, a bit of attraction on the actual ads, as well as also some conversions coming through. Now it's time to start scaling those winners. So basically when scaling, a lot of agencies and brands look at ROAS, which is obviously an important factor because it means that that's the percentage you're getting back for whatever it is you're spending. But at the end of the day, it's also important to understand your CAC, which is your cost to acquire customer, because at the end of the day, like that's actually your biggest metric, is understanding like what am I actually paying in order to get that customer, as opposed to, you know, what return am I getting back from them. So basically how you do this is we have a bunch of different formulas and systems. You can see screenshots below here, but it's understanding like your unit economics and exactly like what is your percentage of cost to deliver that product to the customer. And then based on that, for example, how much profit do you want to be making from whatever's left on your gross profit of that? And then understanding, okay, cool, what's our target ROAS in terms of actually scaling the account? So it is a cool system that you can use in order to figure that out. I'm happy to send you the link after this, and then you can always add it in the notes of this video for people to give a try. But yeah, it's super important when figuring out how you exactly want to scale. So yeah, as I mentioned, like that's going to be your biggest factor in terms of understanding the profit that you're going to be making. Obviously, like supplement brands and beauty brands, you can get away with not making profit on your first acquisition because obviously there's a lifetime value aspect to it. However, I mean, at the end of the day, we all want to be making as much profit as possible. So it's important to understand that when going through. As I said, when running the ads, I do recommend 4 to 7 days, but you want to make sure that every single ad or ad set has spent at least like 1 to 2x the price of the product of the bundle. And then, as I mentioned, if your CAC is higher than your break-even CAC, kill it. If the CAC is lower than your break-even, then scale it, and that's basically going to be your winning ads. Now, to scale it, you're either going to want to duplicate that ad into your winners ad set, or one thing we have been using recently is setting up a separate Advantage Plus campaign and then taking those ad IDs and sticking it in. And that actually works incredibly well. Obviously ensuring that you have also in that Advantage Plus campaign also defined your existing customers. Otherwise, Meta is just going to advertise the same customers and you're going to be paying again to just acquire the same people, which would highly avoid if you're wanting to make money in this process. So yeah, for example, in this case, what we did was we increased the average order value for Blast. We were then able to increase the CAC to 350 Rand. We then knew as long as we were getting customers at less than 350 Rand, we were making a profit on our first sale, and we could scale that up. Now, because the performance is above KPI, we scale up in increments of 10 to 20% every 2 days. This is a slightly slower process of growing an ad account or a campaign, but ultimately allows you to save money in the process. If you just double budget, suddenly like Meta's going to freak out, and then it's going to basically set you to zero, and it's not going to know what to do. Like there obviously are odd cases where you can do this over like periods like Black Friday and other sales periods, but when you are running, let's say, evergreen acquisition strategies, we always recommend going slowly and really kind of just building that up as you go. So this approach is incredibly effective. It allowed us to basically 14x our clients' ad spend while running profitable ads the whole time. So we never dip below that CAC of 350, which is incredibly strong. So now you have basically got your ads, you've been running them, you've tested them, you've figured out exactly what your winners are, you've moved them into the campaign. Now you've got to ask yourself, what's next? How do we continue to improve that performance, and how do we continue to scale the account? Now, the big thing is understanding your metrics and being able to analyze them to gather insights. So, for example, I put here like four key metrics to always look at with an ad is, so for example, your CAC. So that's your effectiveness in driving sales. If your CAC is low, you know that the ad is doing a really good job in terms of actually converting that individual. Then you have your click-through rate. So your click-through rate is your effectiveness of driving traffic to the site. If your click-through rate is really low, you know that it's either a terrible ad or there's not enough urgency in order to drive that person over, in which you can obviously then start to iterate and change things. If your CPM is really, really high, it's basically telling you that your ad is not effective in the sense that it doesn't sit well in Meta's actual ecosystem. So you're going to get rewarded for a cheaper CPM if you have an ad that is easier and better to consume. Because at the end of the day, what happens is platforms like Meta, they make money the longer they keep people on the platform. So you need to make that experience as easy for Meta to serve the ad as possible. So that's, for example, like that's where things like, for example, UGC do really well and generally have a very low CPM, or using some piece of like humor-based advertising will always get you much better CPMs because people obviously enjoying consuming that content, as opposed to something is like, 50% off, it's very product focused and people know immediately that it's an ad. And then the fourth factor, and it's something that people overlook, is the frequency. So understanding what Meta feels that ad should be in terms of the sales process. So for example, if you've got a really high frequency, then you know that Meta is using that ad as a retargeting ad to people that have already been to the site. So this is generally, for example, like a static with some kind of offer, or mentioning like benefits, things like that, because obviously someone needs to know about the brand to then consider it. So then at that consideration phase, it's showing them that ad. So yeah, that's basically how you understand the metrics. Now, not only will you be able to compare ad sets, but by using that method that I've mentioned earlier, that 3-2 method, you can then also start to look at if you basically go into ads manager and you open up your ad account, you can then click the markdown tab, and you'll basically be able to see, so for those DCT ad sets that you have running with the three media, 3 headlines, and the 3 primary text, you'll basically be able to see of those assets which ones are performing the best. And then based on that, you can use that information to even further better the ads that you currently have running. So that's just a kind of a little side note that works really well. And then, yeah, as I said, based on those insights, you can either decide, okay, cool, we need to flip the script and do something very different because what we're doing isn't working. Or you can see, okay, cool, we had success here. how can we make that better? So for example, like if you were offering, let's say like a 10% off and that headline was doing really well, it's like, how can we start to iterate that headline a little bit better in order to obviously drive it more? So do we add like a review to that and then say like now 10% off, or do we call out a bold claim and now say 10% off? Do we pose it as a question? There's all things that you can start to test and iterate on. So for example, like in this case, we basically had, it's like the most basic ad creative ever, but this thing's click-through rate was through the roof. It was performing incredibly well for us. And it was basically just an ad that said 12 signs of an unhealthy gut. And it had all the different symptoms. We then decided to iterate that and built on that. So we had a bunch of different videos. So we had like, for example, like a woman UGC creator. We had the founder, who's obviously an elder male. We had different types of Apple Note style statics. We had obviously the benefits focused statics. And yeah, these all were iterations of what we'd already done that all performed exceptionally well. I think this one specifically with the green smoothie in front of it, like we had a ROAS of like over 600% for over a month, which was epic. Just because it's a pattern breaker, and then also played on the same concepts that we had obviously learned through the process of testing out this specific static. And that moves us up to the next step. Is now your ads are working really well. You've got a good mix of winning ads. You're testing out different ads, and you're slowly increasing that performance over time and becoming a more well-tuned engine, in the sense that you're not driving a lot of traffic and things are working well. The next thing to look at then would be increasing your CRO. So figuring out exactly how can we alter the landing pages and how can we make the process a lot better for our customers to now drive the sales up. Because at the end of the day, if you can take your conversion rate from 1% to 2%, you've already doubled the amount of revenue that you're generating from the ads without having to spend a cent. So that's an incredibly easy and important way to drive up that revenue. And the easiest ways to do this is things like simplifying the copy, providing incentives like free shipping or money back guarantee, or any kind of objection-based sales tactic in order to obviously drive that conversion. I also mentioned here combating objectives through FAQs, so having FAQs available, or even a landing page that addresses your biggest objections that you get from customers, whether that be in your comments on ads or whether that be in your feedback on emails, whatever it is. And then social proof. So for example, having reviews, or if you can, for example, put a review-based app like Looks or Judge Me, where you can have photos or videos of people using the product with their reviews, that's obviously going to be a lot stronger. So for example, with this client specifically, we use something called Hotjar. And what Hotjar does is it records the customer journey, and then you can basically watch back and you can see, for example, why did someone fall off, at what phase did they fall off, and you can even just see where they're clicking and where their cursor is on the site if they're on a desktop platform, which is pretty cool. And through that process, we're basically able to identify a number of different factors and 5x the conversion rate, which is obviously incredible for the brand. We also changed the free shipping threshold because they were at like 1,000 Rand. In order to do that, you had to buy 3 products. So we changed it to 2 products. We then bundled in, obviously, as I mentioned, the products that played off different symptoms and different aspects, and together you kind of needed the 2 to get the desired outcome. So that really drove up the conversion rate. We also added a bunch of social proof and nudges, which are like little also bits of social proof that you can add. And then we also created custom landing pages that were ad centric. So for a while, we actually had a campaign around the Rugby World Cup that played on the concept of braai belly, which was, we got the inspiration from the idea of barley belly, which is when you go to the east and you eat spicy food, you get the runs. So we had the same thing, but with braais and drinking alcohol and eating MSG and things like that. And we had this whole campaign and this landing page kind of tied to that. And as you can see, we had like over 8% for that specific campaign, which was epic. So yeah, at that point, you have a well-oiled system. You've got sales coming in, you're making a ton of revenue, and you really have a scalable acquisition system. It's now time to then look at, okay, cool, like what's next? How do we actually extend that LTV? And these are 2 things we did for the specific customer that are very cost effective and easy to do. And the first is just email marketing. So looking at bringing someone in who can do a lot more content-based marketing and be sending out regular newsletters. So how we like to split that is like 50% educational and then 50% promotional. And basically that allows you to not only get people to know more about the brand and the different products that you have on hand and why they should be taking it, but also encouraging sales every now and then, especially around, for example, paydays or big holidays and those different aspects. And then the second thing is introducing we call it an LTB extender, which is basically on Meta, you have the ability to set up a catalog ad, which is your DPA, otherwise known as. And that basically, we keep it super simple. We literally spend like 50 to 100 bucks a day. And that campaign's objective is just to keep showing ads to people who have purchased in the last 180 days, but haven't bought in the last 20 days. And the idea is that then you stay top of mind, kind of like a very micro, like Red Bull or Coca-Cola type approach, where it's just more a sense of they're seeing the brand everywhere and they realize, oh, you know what, actually I've run out of stock, or I'm about to run out of stock, I should probably buy another one. And obviously your CAC there is very cheap, so it's okay to then go after those same customers, because you know that obviously the CAC is like 50 or 100 Rand. It's okay because we know we'll still make profit through the process of that. So that's something we implemented at the end in order to really kind of extend that LTV. And as a result, the brand is very easily cruising at about 500 grand a month. And I think they're only currently spending about 100K, which is incredibly strong. And yeah, I guess that's our process. That's our 7-step scaling system, and it's obviously worked really, really well. It's made our clients a ton of money, especially with this one, scaling them from 4 figures to 7 figures. Yeah, it's been a good process so far.
Yeah, man, that was very powerful. Thank you for unpacking and sharing that. See, like, there's a few things I actually took some notes here. Like, I actually would highly recommend you guys actually go through this multiple times and stop. And like I usually tell people, when it comes to something this valuable, you actually want to watch it one time and you want to literally like allow it to sink into your dome. And then once it's sunk into your dome, then you watch it again, and then you actually take a pen and you're like, okay, like, let's see what I can improve on here. Let's what I can because there's always something that doesn't matter what the kind of business is that you're running. I mean, if you're ideally looking to obviously increase, the metrics around the performance aspect or what we just unpacked, and dependable on what you're selling, it's like you're somewhere you're missing something, right? So it's like we can you can puzzle them together as if you really just pay attention, and if you basically allow yourself the time to actually do the work and go through it's one thing having info, but it's then the next thing obviously of taking that thing and then actually putting it to action, which I'm seeing a lot on the internet right now. I mean, this is a conversation that we had just before we hit the record button. Is that I told Jay basically that so in a world where it's where people are trying to shove a narrative down your throat, how can we actually provide real value? As to a point where we want to share from personal perspective and also from real experience. And this is why I decided to do this with James, because I've seen some of their work. I've known them for some time now, and I really believe in what they're doing. So I mean, there's one thing actually I have top of mind here on the notes that I want to take before we kind of wrap it up here. So there's a few things I made a note of, specifically sometimes but I hear a lot of people talk in terms of, in that advertising realm of twisting the knife. So I obviously went through the perspective of, the twisting the knife on the pain anchor. So how would you say when you guys are approaching a brand, or when you guys are starting with a brand, you've obviously unpacked the way of thinking when it comes to that, but how important do you think it is, to twist the knife? Like how deep do you twist the knife? Like where do you draw the line?
For sure. So I mean, obviously your advertising policies are obviously also going to limit you to some degree. There's some things you can and can't say. So obviously there's certain keywords that are going to get you in trouble, obviously. When it comes to actually twisting the knife, it's generally, we won't take it too far. What we'll generally do is have some form of pain point that's at least, it's painful enough to want to drive some degree of curiosity or action. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the reason that you feel disconnected from your partner is because you've got bloating. We're not going to make that as direct, but we will play on the fact of the fact that maybe in our advert someone is feeling uncomfortable in their pants, or maybe they're feeling a little bit sluggish, or they potentially the pants are tight, or they're just not feeling good about themselves. So a self-confidence thing you could potentially play on. And then what we would generally do is rather use on a landing page is then bring people's real experience to be if someone's got a quote or a review that they've left there being oh, this cured my bloating, and now I've got the best relationship with myself, my partner, whatever, or if we can find something that's quite unique, then we can obviously play into that a little bit more. I would say in terms of twisting the knife, we obviously don't want to be aggressive. We don't want to make people feel like you don't want someone to feel so terrible about themselves that they almost like are put off the brand. The same as it's kind of like taking a sales process. Is you want to cause enough pain and frustration that you are inclined to click through, but you're not at a point where you start thinking like you know what, screw this brand, like this brand's like made me feel bad about myself. You want to have the problem but then a solution right away.
Yeah, got it, man. Powerful that you shared that. So I think my last little iteration that I have on here, we've seen all this stuff that's been happening with, let's just say in the world of AI or in the world of business, and you know how that's become of relevance in your world and in my world where we work with technology companies and stuff. I mean, I want you to kind of just give me your perspective, man. How has it been impacting what you guys do? How have you been spending a bit of your energy when it comes to AI? And, you know, how do you, well, rather, is it actually important to click that button when they give you the AI option? You know, like, does it actually help, or where does that kind of lead to?
For sure. So I mean, we actually currently reutilizing AI when it comes to the ad creative process. So in terms of especially static ads, there's a lot you can do. Just getting like the basics done. So for example, like that's incredibly powerful. Product photography for websites. If a website's got terrible product photography, there's a lot you can do with AI there just to make it look better. I mean, there are also like, I think in advertising, you can also go the unethical route where, like, for example, there are people that are using it for like UGC-based content and it's not actually legit. So, I mean, there's definitely lines to it where you have to kind of be strong in your integrity. But yeah, in terms of copywriting, in terms of creative, that process is incredibly effective, and it's also a lot more time efficient and resource efficient. So rather than you having to pay a graphic designer to have a bunch of stuff made, you can test out a number of different concepts, and when something starts to work, then you go, okay, cool, we've got proof of concept. Let's potentially invest in UGC creators, or let's get a graphic designer to come and make this even better. So there obviously is that aspect to it. So I think it saves a lot of money. It makes it a lot quicker and more effective. From an ad scaling point of view, there's even things you can do in terms of rules and automations now. So if you are, like the things I've told you today, like increasing by 10 to 20% budget if it's at a certain, let's say, performance metric, those are things you can actually plug into your ad manager now these days, and it'll basically do it for you on your behalf. Like, so as long as it's over, let's say, like you set it the goal of, okay, I need a CPA of X, or cost per purchase of X, every single day. As long as the cost per purchase is above this amount, scale up. If it gets above like a certain, let's say you set a ceiling, and you say if it gets to that ceiling, then bring down the ad spend. And those are all like little bits you can put into your ad accounts. The ads manager also, you can program it to send you your weekly report, a daily report based on different metrics. So there's a lot that you can do these days with AI, which is epic. And I think especially if you look at the advertising platform as a whole, they're going more in the sense that the platform wants you to give them power in terms of letting the pixel do its work, letting Meta decide how to show the ads, and keeping everything quite open-ended. It's making it a lot more accessible to a lot more people. So now more businesses can advertise without getting overwhelmed and thinking, you know, shit, like how do I actually do this? It's all like this, I don't know what CAC means, I don't know what CTR is, I don't know how I should set up the ads manager. It's a lot more effective now. I think it's kind of gotten to the point where you are either an ads manager or you're boosting posts. And now a lot more people who were like on the boosting post side of things are realizing, okay, it's actually not that tough to now use the systems that we have in place. So yeah.
Got it, man. Got it. Well, bro, that was jam packed. That was a lot. I'm gonna definitely go over this video again. I think this is well enormously valuable in the sense of, like, you know, when it comes to just understanding how you can go on the distribution, kind of solving for, you know, the acquisition and the distribution and the whole cycle. So thank you for sharing that, brother. So if you guys want to go check out more of what they do in terms of like delivery and in terms of all that stuff, I will leave all of the information down in the box down below, specifically on what we went through now. If you also want to maybe see what that looks like, it will be in the box down below. Yeah, and any questions, leave it in the comment section down below. If you guys liked this kind of style of like pod style kind of chat, kind of getting into some real cases, some like real action-based kind of stuff in the trenches, then I will be doing more of them. And yeah, we'll be looking forward to you guys' feedback. And James, I hope you have a beautiful rest of the day, brother. And thank you for your time. We'll do this sometime
You
soon
too,
again.
man. I appreciate you having me. We'll definitely catch up for a coffee when you're in Cape Town next.
Of course. All right, brother. We'll
Cool.
chat soon then,
Let's
man.
do it, man.
All right. Bye-bye.
Cheers, bro.